Cheng Wei entered the restaurant like he owned it. His sleek black suit, polished shoes, and the air of superiority that surrounded him made it clear he was untouchable. His presence alone seemed to silence the room. The rich, the powerful, and the famous, everyone knew his name. His fortune, amassed through strategic investments and ruthless tactics, was the stuff of legends. And then there was Isaiah, the waiter. Standing quietly, he watched as the billionaire's entourage laughed boisterously at their table. He could hear every word, every mocking laugh. But what struck him the most was the way Cheng Wei looked at him, as if he were nothing more than a shadow in the background. "Hey, waiter," Cheng barked, looking up at Isaiah as if he were a mere inconvenience. "Your accent sounds like you've never left the backwoods. Can you even speak proper English?" The table erupted in laughter. Isaiah didn't flinch. He had heard this before. The insults, the mockery, the disdain. It wasn't new to him. But today, something inside him shifted. As he stood there, holding the silver tray, he could feel the weight of something brewing inside him. Today was different. He wasn't just going to take this insult lying down. Cheng Wei had been born into poverty. His father worked tirelessly at a factory in the outskirts of Beijing, struggling to make ends meet. But Cheng's relentless ambition, combined with his ruthless approach to business, had catapulted him to unimaginable heights. He had built a multi-billion-dollar empire with stakes in tech, real estate, and manufacturing. To the world, he was a self-made man, a genius of modern capitalism. But to the people who served him, like Isaiah, he was nothing more than a bully, a man who had forgotten the struggles of those who didn't have his wealth and power. Isaiah, on the other hand, had never aspired to be anything more than a waiter. He had come to this city years ago with his mother, both hoping to make a better life for themselves. His mother had worked 2 jobs to make sure he was educated, teaching him that dignity didn't come from money, it came from integrity. Isaiah had embraced that belief with every fiber of his being. He wasn't rich, but he was proud, and he would never allow anyone to degrade him for who he was. It was after a long shift, when most of the guests had already left, that Isaiah overheard a conversation that would change everything. Cheng Wei's voice carried easily from across the room. He was speaking in rapid Chinese with his business partner, a man who looked just as polished as Cheng, but lacked the same commanding presence. "The market is so easy to manipulate. People are sheep. All we need to do is create the right narrative, and they'll follow." Cheng's voice dripped with contempt. "My competitors? They're just obstacles. I know exactly how to deal with them." Isaiah stopped dead in his tracks. He had been moving toward the back of the restaurant when those words hit him. Manipulate the market? Create a narrative? He had heard rumors, of course. Rumors of how Cheng used unethical tactics to destroy his competitors, of backroom deals and shady practices. But hearing it straight from the source sent a cold chill through him. Cheng wasn't just a businessman. He was a man who wielded power with no conscience, who believed he was untouchable. As Isaiah stood there, hidden in the shadows, something within him snapped. This man, who had humiliated him for so long, who treated people like dirt, he had to be stopped. But Isaiah knew he couldn't take him down in the way everyone would expect. He wasn't rich. He didn't have power. But what he did have was knowledge. Knowledge that could bring Cheng Wei to his knees. This isn't just about revenge, Isaiah thought, his mind racing. This is about justice. The next few weeks were a blur of secrecy. Isaiah, now more determined than ever, began to observe Cheng closely. He watched how the billionaire interacted with his employees, with his business partners. He listened, taking mental notes. It was easy for Cheng to assume that Isaiah was just another nameless, faceless worker, someone who would never matter. But Isaiah was no fool. He saw things others didn't. He heard the conversations no one else paid attention to. Cheng's arrogance was his biggest weakness. He had been so confident in his own success that he didn't even bother to hide his schemes. And Isaiah was learning to read between the lines. He spent hours after work in the back room, flipping through newspapers and business journals, trying to understand the full extent of Cheng's empire. He learned that Cheng's wealth was built on a series of morally dubious deals. The more he uncovered, the clearer it became. Cheng was a man who had risen to power by crushing anyone who stood in his way. But Isaiah didn't want to be just another victim. He wasn't going to let this man get away with it any longer. As the days passed, Isaiah began to put together a plan that would shake the very foundation of Cheng's empire, a plan that would expose the billionaire's darkest secrets. And all Cheng Wei had to do was underestimate the quiet waiter. Isaiah knew that this wasn't going to be an easy fight. Cheng Wei wasn't just a billionaire, he was a man who had spent years weaving a complex web of lies, deceit, and manipulation. To take him down, Isaiah needed more than just a few scraps of information. He needed something concrete, something that would expose expose the heart of Cheng's empire. For the first time in his life, Isaiah felt the urgency of a mission. It wasn't just about exposing a businessman's crimes, it was about rewriting the narrative of his own life. The quiet, invisible waiter was about to make his mark on a world that had never given him a second glance. Cheng Wei's arrogance was his Achilles heel. It was the one thing that would eventually lead to his downfall. Isaiah began to shadow Cheng's movements carefully, watching every little interaction with people around him. He took note of the businessman's frequent meetings, the ones held in private rooms, away from the eyes of the public. He knew that Cheng was used to dealing with powerful men, but what Isaiah had that Cheng didn't was time. Time to learn, observe, and plan. A month after he had overheard Cheng's conversation, Isaiah finally found his first piece of leverage. It happened on an unusually quiet night. The restaurant was nearly empty, and most of the staff had already begun their shift changes. Isaiah was clearing a table near Cheng's regular booth when a folded set of papers slipped from the billionaire's briefcase and onto the floor. Without thinking, Isaiah picked up the papers and returned them to Cheng. But when he did, his eyes caught a few crucial lines: a name, a date, and a large sum of money, marked in red ink. Isaiah knew right away that this was no ordinary financial document. This was something far more sinister. It wasn't just a transfer of funds, it was a deal that involved illegal practices, bribery, tax evasion, and even the cover-up of an industrial accident that had cost lives. Isaiah's heart pounded as he processed the document in his mind. He had to act quickly, but carefully. One wrong move, and he could end up in prison, or worse. He knew the stakes. Cheng was too powerful, too connected. This was no longer about just taking down a bully. It was about survival. Isaiah's plan started to take shape. He would need to get his hands on more documents, more evidence. But not just any evidence. He needed proof that Cheng's entire empire was built on lies, and that would require more than just a quick glance at a document here or there. It would require access to his networks. Isaiah had seen Cheng use his phone for dozens of private calls, often to people Isaiah had never seen before. He knew that if he could get access to that phone just for a few minutes, he could find the information he needed to expose Cheng. But there was one major problem. Cheng never left his phone unattended. Isaiah spent the next few weeks testing his luck. Every time Cheng came to the restaurant, Isaiah was there, watching, listening, and waiting for the right moment. He observed how Cheng interacted with his employees, his clients, and even the other waiters. Each day, Isaiah made mental notes. He began to notice the routines that Cheng followed, the way he interacted with his associates, how he liked his food prepared, and most importantly, how he handled his phone. The phone was always within arm's reach, a symbol of Cheng's power. One night, as Isaiah cleared a table near Cheng's booth, he saw the opportunity he had been waiting for. Cheng was deep in conversation with an associate, and his phone was resting on the table, unattended for the first time in weeks. The moment was now or never. Isaiah approached the table, pretending to wipe down the counter. As he neared, he casually reached over and picked up the phone. It felt like an eternity as he held it in his hands, trying to steady his nerves. He had to act quickly. With shaking hands, he unlocked the phone, using the same simple passcode Cheng always used, a series of numbers that were too obvious to be a real security measure. It was as if Cheng had underestimated the people around him. Inside the phone, Isaiah found exactly what he was looking for: emails, messages, contracts, all leading to one conclusion: Cheng Wei's empire was built on corruption. Isaiah's hands were shaking as he read through the messages. The evidence was undeniable. Cheng had used his wealth and influence to silence people, to destroy lives, and to eliminate anyone who stood in his way. But it wasn't just the business deals that shocked Isaiah. It was the personal messages, the threats, the intimidation tactics. Cheng's arrogance wasn't just an act. It was a deeply ingrained belief that he was untouchable. But now, Isaiah had the key to take him down. Bias' next step was clear. He had to get this information into the right hands. Isaiah knew he was playing a dangerous game. There was no turning back now. If Cheng found out what he had done, Isaiah's life would be over. But the fire burning inside him, this need to make things right, was too strong. He began to plan his next move. He needed a contact, someone who could help him use the evidence without putting himself at risk. But who could he trust? As he mulled over his options, one name stood out: Lena, a journalist he had met a few months ago. Lena had a reputation for exposing the corrupt and the powerful, and Isaiah knew she had the skills to take Cheng down. Isaiah's thoughts raced as he sat in his small apartment, staring at the phone in his hand. He had the evidence, the kind of proof that could ruin an empire. But it wasn't enough to simply have it. He needed to ensure it reached the right people. Lena had always been outspoken about the injustices of the world, her articles sparking debates and even taking down some of the most powerful figures in the country. country. She was his last hope. Without hesitation, Isaiah dialed her number. His heart pounded in his chest as the phone rang. Each second felt like an eternity. When Lena finally answered, her voice was as calm and sharp as he remembered. "What's up, Isaiah? You sound like you're in trouble." "Lena, I need your help. I've got something big. I can't go to the police." "But you, if anyone can expose this, it's you." Lena's tone shifted immediately. "What are you talking about?" Isaiah hesitated for a moment, then said, "It's about Cheng Wei. I have evidence, hard evidence, enough to bring down his entire empire." There was silence on the other end. Then Lena spoke with a slight edge of disbelief. "Cheng Wei? The billionaire?" "Yeah, the guy who's untouchable. I have everything. Emails, texts, contracts, the works." Lena let out a low whistle. "And you're sure this is all legitimate?" Isaiah nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "I've been watching him for months. I've seen everything. He's corrupt. He's built his wealth on murder, bribery, and deceit." Lena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You need to meet me. This kind of story doesn't just fall into our laps. It'll be a fight." Isaiah swallowed hard. "I'm ready for it." The meeting was set for the following evening. Lena had a small office on the outskirts of the city, a place that no one would think to look for a journalist. It was the perfect hideout. Isaiah arrived early, his nerves tingling with anticipation. He wasn't sure if he was more afraid of Cheng's wrath or the immense weight of what he was about to do. When Lena arrived, she was all business. No small talk, no pleasantries, just straight to the point. She led Isaiah into the back of her office, where a desk stacked with papers and coffee cups sat. A single laptop flickered in the corner, its screen displaying various news reports about corruption and injustice. Isaiah pulled out the flash drive from his pocket and handed it to Lena. "Everything's on here. If you want to bring Cheng down, this is all you need." Lena took the flash drive, her fingers brushing against Isaiah's briefly. She inserted it into her laptop and began to sift through the files. The more she read, the more her eyes widened. "You weren't kidding," she said, barely above a whisper. This is massive." Isaiah watched her closely, seeing the disbelief in her eyes, but also something else. Determination. This wasn't just a story to her. It was a mission, and Lena didn't back down from missions. "We're going to need more than just these documents," she said, her voice firm. "If we're going to expose Cheng Wei, we need to prove he's still active in these crimes. We need to get him on tape, or at least catch him red-handed." Isaiah nodded. He understood the gravity of what they were about to do. It wasn't just about exposing the truth. It was about surviving long enough to do it. The following weeks were a blur of planning, coordination, and mounting danger. Cheng Wei's empire was vast, and every step they took seemed to put them further in the crosshairs. Lena used her resources to dig deeper, while Isaiah worked tirelessly to gather more evidence from his position at the restaurant. One night, as Isaiah was about to clock out, Cheng arrived with one of his associates, a man Isaiah hadn't seen before. The two sat at the same booth as always, and Cheng's associate began speaking in hushed tones, his voice filled with anger. "You've been too reckless, Cheng. We can't keep doing this. If anyone finds out, everything falls apart." Isaiah leaned in closer, trying to catch every word. It was then that he heard the name Lena. The mention of her name sent a chill down his spine. Cheng had discovered the journalist's involvement, and that meant Lena was in danger. Isaiah wasted no time. He texted Lena immediately, warning her of the potential threat. But before he could even receive her reply, Cheng Wei stood up from the booth and left, his associate following closely behind. Isaiah knew this was his moment. He had to act before Cheng went into full damage control mode. He quickly followed the two men outside, using the back exit to avoid being seen. As he slipped into the shadows, he saw Cheng and his associate getting into a car. Without thinking, Isaiah ran to his own vehicle and started the engine. He was going to follow them. The streets were empty at this hour, and the rain began to fall in light sheets. Isaiah kept a safe distance, making sure not to alert them. His heart raced, the adrenaline pushing him forward. They eventually arrived at an abandoned building on the outskirts of the city. Isaiah parked a few blocks away, grabbed his phone, and quickly texted Lena. "I'm here. They're meeting someone. We need to expose this now." Lena's reply came through in a few seconds. "You're on your own for this one. I'm sending backup. Stay safe." With his phone in his hand, Isaiah took a deep breath and stepped out of his car. The next few minutes were crucial. He had to get inside without being seen. He had to find the truth, no matter the cost. Isaiah's heart raced as he moved swiftly through the shadowy alley, his steps echoing in the silence of the night. The abandoned building loomed ahead, its dark windows like eyes watching him, daring him to come closer. He had no choice. This was his chance to bring Cheng Wei down for good. Isaiah had been following Cheng and his associate for hours. The more they moved, the clearer it became. Something big was happening here, and he was about to walk straight into the lion's den. But he was determined. This wasn't just about his life anymore. This was about exposing a man who had used his wealth to destroy lives. This was about justice. Isaiah crouched behind a dumpster, his breath coming in shallow gasps. He checked his phone for a signal. signal. Lena's backup hadn't arrived yet. She had warned him to be careful, but Isaiah couldn't. Wait. He couldn't afford to lose this opportunity. Taking a deep breath, he sprinted toward the entrance. The door was slightly ajar. With a quick glance over his shoulder, he slipped inside, the darkness swallowing him whole. The musty smell of old wood and decay filled his nostrils as he crept through the building. His phone's screen illuminated the dark hallways as he checked his location. This place felt like a maze, but he had memorized the layout from the surveillance footage Lena had provided. A few floors up, he finally found it. The door to a large conference room was cracked open. Inside, Cheng Wei sat at a long, polished table, his back turned. He was speaking to someone. Isaiah's heart skipped a beat when he heard the voice. "We need to act fast," the man said. "If we don't, everything will fall apart. That journalist Lena is getting too close." Lena. Isaiah's stomach twisted. It was clear now. Cheng was onto them. If he didn't act quickly, they would lose their chance forever. Isaiah pushed the door open just a crack, peeking inside. The room was dimly lit, but the figures were clear. Cheng, sitting confidently, was speaking to a few of his high-ranking associates. The conversation was growing more intense, more urgent. "I don't care about Lena's articles," Cheng said, his voice cold. "She's a nuisance, but that's not the problem. The real issue is Isaiah. He's the one who's been gathering evidence against us. He's the one who—" Before he could finish, the door creaked. Isaiah froze. In a flash, Cheng turned toward the door. His eyes narrowed as they met Isaiah's. Time seemed to freeze for a moment. How had he been spotted? Isaiah's body froze, but his instincts kicked in. He bolted from the door, rushing down the hallway, as fast as his legs could carry him. Behind him, the sound of footsteps grew louder. Cheng's men were on the move. He could hear them shouting orders, but Isaiah didn't dare look back. He had to make it out. He had to survive. Reaching the stairwell, Isaiah hurriedly descended, his mind racing. Every muscle in his body screamed for him to stop, but he pushed forward. The door to the building was in sight when he heard it, the unmistakable sound of a gunshot. Isaiah's heart stopped. His eyes widened in horror. "Lena!" He spun on his heels and dashed toward the source of the noise, ignoring the pain in his legs. He had to find her. She couldn't be in danger now, not after everything they had been through. By the time Isaiah reached the ground floor, the building was alive with chaos. The sound of shouting, doors slamming, and the rush of running feet filled the air. But in the center of it all, there was Lena, standing tall, defiant, with her phone in her hand, a fierce look on her face. She looked at Isaiah, her expression hard. "You should have waited for backup," she said, her voice calm despite the danger around them. "I couldn't," Isaiah replied, breathless. "I thought you were—" "I'm fine, but we need to go, now!" Isaiah didn't question her. He ran beside her as they sprinted toward the exit. The moment they stepped outside, Lena turned and raised her phone high in the air. "Live streaming. I've been streaming everything," she said. "Every conversation, every secret, every threat. Cheng's empire is finished." Isaiah couldn't believe it. They had done it. In that moment, he realized how far they had come. They had exposed Cheng Wei for who he truly was. As they reached their car, Isaiah glanced behind them one last time. Cheng Wei's empire was crumbling, and there was no way to stop it. The damage had been done. The news broke within hours. Lena's live stream had captured everything. The conversations, the threats, the proof of Cheng Wei's crimes. The world was in shock as the story spread across social media and news outlets. Within days, Cheng was arrested. His vast fortune was seized, and his empire began to unravel. The people he had hurt, families, workers, and the countless victims of his corruption, finally had their voices heard. Isaiah watched it all unfold from the comfort of his apartment, sitting beside Lena, his partner in this crusade. He couldn't help but feel a sense of pride, but also something else, the weight of what it took to get here. As the final news reports came in, Lena turned to Isaiah. "We did it," she said with a smile. "But this is just the beginning." Isaiah nodded. "Yeah, there's still a lot of work to be done, but we can rest easy knowing we made a difference." Lena looked out the window, her gaze distant. "And we'll keep making a difference, because as long as we stand up for the truth, the fight isn't over." Isaiah smiled. "We'll fight together, always."